The baby's laugh echoed through the cold manor, and something in the vampire king finally broke. Lucien Zorath stood frozen in the doorway of the eastern wing, his pale fingers gripping the ancient wood until it splinked beneath his supernatural strength. For 3 centuries he had been stone, unmoved by human suffering, untouched by mortal joy, immune to the fleeting warmth of their brief lives. Yet that sound, that pure, innocent sound, cut through his chest like silver through flesh. He shouldn't be here. This wing was forbidden, even to him, and he was lord of this entire cursed domain. But the sound had drawn him like blood calls to hunger, and now he stood paralyzed, listening to a human infant laugh somewhere in the shadows beyond. The manor had been empty of human life for decades. He'd made certain of that after Isabeau, after the betrayal. After he'd learned that softness was simply another word for weakness, and love was just a prettier name for eventual destruction. So why was there a child here now? Lucien moved through the corridor with predatory silence, his white hair catching what little moonlight filtered through the shattered windows. His reflection didn't show in the broken mirrors lining the walls, it never did, but he could feel his own tension radiating outward like cold fire. The laugh came again, followed by a woman's voice, soft and melodic, speaking words he couldn't quite distinguish. He reached the chamber at the corridor's end and found the door already open. Inside, illuminated by a dozen carefully placed candles, a young woman sat on the floor with an infant cradled in her arms. She was singing something gentle, rocking the child with practiced ease, completely unaware that death itself was watching from the threshold. Lucien's throat tightened. The woman had dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, and even in the candlelight, he could see the exhaustion etched into her delicate features. She wore simple clothes jeans and an oversized sweater that had seen better days, and her feet were bare against the cold stone floor. The baby, no more than 6 months old, was wrapped in what looked like every blanket the woman could find, and was reaching up to grab at her mother's face with tiny, grasping fingers. "Who are you?" Lucien's voice cut through the intimate scene like a blade through silk. The woman's head snapped up, and for the first time in a century, Lucien found himself staring into eyes that held no fear. They were green, the color of forests he'd once walked through as a mortal man, and they regarded him with a strange mixture of resignation and defiance. "I'm Thea Lawson," she said quietly, adjusting her hold on the baby protectively. "And before you ask, yes, I know I'm trespassing. Yes, I know this is your property. And no, I don't care." Lucien blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her directness. Humans usually screamed or ran or begged. They didn't sit calmly on dusty floors and tell him they didn't care about breaking into his ancestral home. "You should care," he said, stepping into the room. The candles flickered at his movement, casting his shadow long across the walls. "Do you have any idea what I am?" "A vampire." Thea's voice remained steady. "I figured that out when I saw the portraits in the gallery. Same face, different centuries. It wasn't hard to put together." The baby made a soft cooing sound, and Thea immediately shifted her attention back to the child, murmuring something soothing. Lucien watched, transfixed despite himself. The tenderness in her movements was so absolute, so consuming, that it created a kind of bubble around them, a pocket of warmth in his frozen world. "If you know what I am," Lucien said slowly, "then you understand I could kill you both without a second thought." "You could." Thea met his gaze again. "But you won't. And what makes you so certain?" "Because you've been standing there for 5 minutes and we're still breathing." She brushed a kiss against the baby's forehead. "If you wanted us dead, we would be. Which means you're curious. And curious vampires ask questions before they kill." Lucien found himself moving closer, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't name. "You're either remarkably brave or staggeringly foolish." "I'm desperate," Thea corrected. "There's a difference." He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough now to hear the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, to smell the sweet scent of her blood beneath her skin. It called to him the way it always did the eternal hunger that defined his existence, but there was something else too. Something that made him want to listen rather than feed. "Explain," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of authority. Thea was quiet for a moment, swaying slightly to keep the baby content. When she spoke, her words were careful, measured. "My daughter is sick. The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her. She's fading, and I've tried everything, every hospital, every specialist, every experimental treatment I could beg my way into. Nothing works." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've sold everything I own. I'm $3,000 in debt. I lost my apartment 2 weeks ago, and when I had nowhere else to go, I remembered the stories my grandmother used to tell me about the old Zorath Manor on the hill, about the creature who lived here, about how vampires have powers beyond human understanding." Lucien's jaw tightened. Your grandmother told you stories about me. She told me stories about monsters, Thea said quietly, but also about how some monsters remember what it's like to be human. How some of them still have hearts, even if those hearts don't beat anymore. Your grandmother was a fool if she believed that. Maybe. Thea's fingers traced gentle patterns on the baby's back. But I'm out of options, and fairy tales are all I have left. So I broke into your home, and I'm begging for you to help my daughter. If vampire blood has healing properties, if there's any magic in your world that could save her, I'll do anything, pay any price, make any deal. The baby, her daughter, chose that moment to laugh again, a bright sound that seemed impossibly large for such a small creature. She was looking at nothing in particular, just delighted by some private baby joke, and the sound of it hit Lucien like a physical blow. He turned away sharply, his hands clenching into fists. You should leave. I can't. You can, and you will. He kept his back to her, afraid of what she might see in his face. I don't help humans. I don't save dying children. I am not the merciful monster your grandmother imagined. Then kill us. Thea's voice was soft but unwavering. Because I'm not leaving, and I'm not watching my daughter die slowly in some shelter or on some street corner. If this is where our story ends, at least I tried everything. Lucien spun back to face her, his eyes blazing with inhuman light. You would martyr yourself and your child on the chance that I might have a conscience? I would gamble on the fact that you're standing here arguing with me instead of drinking us dry. Thea held his gaze. I see you, Lucien Zorath. I see someone who's been alone for a very long time, someone who's been hurt, someone who's built walls so high that he's forgotten what the sun looks like. But I also see someone who stopped to listen when he could have simply killed. That means something. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the baby's soft breathing and the distant howl of wind against the manor's walls. Finally, Lucien exhaled slowly. What's her name? Mirabelle. Thea's expression softened. Mira for short. And what's wrong with her? Specifically, they don't know. Her organs are failing one by one, but there's no disease they can identify, no genetic marker they can find. It's like her body is just giving up. Thea's voice broke. She's 6 months old, and she should be rolling over and trying to crawl and babbling constantly. Instead, there are days she barely has the strength to cry. Today is a good day. Today she laughed, but good days are becoming rare. Lucien studied the child more carefully. Now that he was paying attention with his supernatural senses, he could feel a wrongness in her energy, a dimming of the life force that should burn bright in one so young. It was subtle, the kind of thing a human would never detect until it was far too late. But to his ancient eyes it was obvious. The child was dying, slowly but certainly. Vampire blood doesn't work the way humans think it does, he said finally. It's not a cure-all. It can heal wounds, reverse damage, even extend life significantly, but it requires an exchange, a bond. And bonds with humans are. He trailed off, old pain flickering across his features. Complicated. What kind of exchange? Blood for blood. My blood would flow into her veins, healing what's broken, strengthening what's weak. But in return, she would be tied to me. Not turned, she's far too young and weak for that, but connected. She would carry a trace of my essence for the rest of her life. And I would be able to sense her, always. Know when she's hurt, when she's in danger, when she's afraid. Thea absorbed this information carefully. Would it save her? Possibly. Probably. But there's no guarantee, and once the bond is formed, it cannot be broken. She would be mine to protect, whether I wanted that responsibility or not. And me? Thea asked quietly. Would I be bonded to you too? Lucien's gaze sharpened. Why would you be? Because I won't let you do this to my daughter without ensuring I can protect her from you if needed. Thea's voice was steady. If you're going to be tied to her, then tie yourself to me as well. That way, if you ever try to hurt her, I'll know. I'll feel it. And I'll fight you with everything I have. Despite himself, Lucien felt something like admiration stir in his chest. You're asking me to create a three-way bond. That's ancient magic, human, powerful magic. It would tie the three of us together in ways you can't imagine. Then help me imagine. Thea shifted Mira in her arms, the baby now drowsing peacefully against her shoulder. Explain it to me so I understand what I'm agreeing to. Lucien moved to the window, looking out over the wild gardens that had once been his pride. A three-way bond would mean we share more than just awareness. We would share emotions, at least the strong ones. If you were terrified, I would feel it. If I were angry, you would sense it. The child would be protected by both of us, sustained by my blood but anchored by your love. It's powerful enough that it might save her, even if simple vampire blood wouldn't be sufficient. Are there downsides, beyond being permanently connected to a vampire? His tone was dry. Yes, you would need to stay close to me, at least initially. The bond takes time to stabilize, living here in the manor for several months at minimum. You would also become sensitive to sunlight, not vulnerable like I am, but uncomfortable. And other vampires would be able to sense my mark on you, which would either protect you or paint a target on your back, depending on their relationship with me. Thea was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then she asked, would it hurt her? The process? No. Lucien's voice softened slightly. She's young enough that her body will accept the change naturally. For you, there might be some discomfort, but nothing unbearable. For me, he trailed off. For you? He turned back to face her, and his expression was unguarded for the first time. For me, it would be opening a door I sealed shut a very long time ago, feeling things I've chosen not to feel. Caring about mortals whose lives are barely a heartbeat compared to my eternity. It would be a risk, but you're considering it. Thea's eyes searched his face. Why? Lucien didn't answer immediately. How could he explain that the sound of a baby's laugh had cracked something open in him? That for the first time in 300 years, he felt something other than the hollow ache of existence? That this desperate woman with her dying child had reminded him of who he'd once been, before the darkness consumed everything? Because I'm tired, he said finally, and the honesty in those words surprised even him. Tired of being alone. Tired of this empty manor and this empty existence, and because when I look at your daughter, I see. He stopped, struggling for words. I see a chance. For what? I don't know. But it's more than I've had in centuries. Thea stood slowly, cradling Mira against her chest. She crossed the space between them until she was standing directly in front of him, close enough that he could hear the blood rushing through her veins, could see the pulse point at her throat. Then do it, she said softly. Save my daughter. Bind us together, and I promise you won't regret it. You can't promise that. I can try. A small smile touched her lips. Besides, you said it yourself, you're curious, and I get the feeling you haven't been curious about anything in a very long time. Lucien stared at her for a long moment, weighing choices and consequences. Every rational part of him screamed that this was foolish, dangerous, a mistake he would live to regret for the rest of his immortal existence. But the part of him that had woken at the sound of a baby's laugh, the part he'd thought was dead and buried, was louder. Very well, he said quietly. I'll do it. But understand this, Thea Lawson, once we begin this, there's no going back. You will be mine to protect, and I take my responsibilities seriously. You will live here, under my roof, by my rules. You will trust me with your daughter's life and your own, and in return, I will move heaven and earth to keep you both safe. Do you agree to these terms? I do. Thea didn't hesitate. Then we start tonight. The ritual required preparation. Lucien led Thea and Mira to his private chambers rooms. He hadn't allowed another soul to enter in over a century. They were vast and luxurious, decorated in the old style with heavy curtains, dark wood furniture, and a massive 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk. A fire roared in the hearth, the first warmth Thea had felt in weeks. Lay her on the bed, Lucy instructed, moving to a cabinet and retrieving several items, a silver knife, a crystal chalice, and what looked like ancient parchment covered in symbols. Thea didn't recognize. Thea placed Mira gently on the bed, surrounding her with pillows to keep her secure. The baby was fully asleep now, her tiny chest rising and falling with each precious breath. Looking at her daughter, Thea felt a surge of fierce love so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. She would do anything for this child. Anything. The bond requires blood from all three of us, Lucien explained, setting the items on a low table near the bed. A few drops from the child, more from you since you're stronger, and my own blood as the anchor. The symbols on this parchment are old protection wards. They'll ensure the magic flows correctly and safely. Have you done this before? Thea asked. Once. A very long time ago. His expression darkened. It didn't end well. What happened? The human I bonded with betrayed me, used the connection to learn my secrets, my weaknesses, and then sold that information to vampire hunters. Lucien's voice was flat, emotionless, but Thea could sense the old pain beneath the words. They killed 17 of my kind before I stopped them, and the woman Isabeau, she died in the fighting. The bond broke violently when she did, and I swore I would never make that mistake again. Thea reached out slowly and placed her hand over his. His skin was cold as marble, but she didn't pull away. I'm not her. I won't betray you. You don't know that. You don't know what you'll feel or think once the bond settles. You might hate me, might fear me, might decide that the monster who saved your daughter is still a monster who needs to be destroyed. Or, Thea said softly, I might decide that the person who saved my daughter when no one else could is worth trusting, worth knowing, worth caring about. Lucien's fingers curled around hers, his grip gentle despite his supernatural strength. You're either the bravest human I've ever met or the most foolish. I've been told I'm both." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. Then he pulled away. "All business again. We should begin. The sooner the bond is in place, the sooner your daughter starts to heal." The ritual itself was simpler than Thea expected. Lucien used the silver knife to make a small cut on Mira's tiny hand. She didn't even wake, just made a soft sound in her sleep, and let 3 drops of blood fall into the chalice. Then he turned to Thea. "Your palm," he said quietly. Thea held out her hand without hesitation. The knife was sharp enough that she barely felt the cut, just a quick sting, and then the warm flow of blood. Lucien caught it in the chalice, letting her bleed for several seconds before pressing a cloth to the wound. "Now mine," he said, and drew the blade across his own palm. His blood was darker than human blood, almost black in the firelight, and it seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. It flowed into the chalice, mixing with theirs, and Thea watched in fascination as the 3 bloods swirled together, creating patterns that looked almost intentional, almost beautiful. Lucien began to speak in a language Thea didn't recognize, something old and rhythmic, with syllables that seemed to echo strangely in the room. As he spoke, he used his bloodied finger to draw symbols on Mira's forehead, then on Thea's, then on his own. The blood glowed faintly as he worked, pulsing with soft red light. Then he lifted the chalice to his lips and drank deeply. When he lowered it, his eyes were blazing with power, bright as stars. He offered the chalice to Thea. "Drink," he commanded, "all of it." Thea took the chalice with shaking hands. The blood inside was still warm, and it smelled like copper and smoke and something indefinable. She closed her eyes, thought of Mira, and drank. It tasted like lightning and midnight and ancient forests. It burned going down, but not painfully, more like fire that warmed from within. She drained the chalice completely, and as soon as she swallowed the last drop, the world exploded. Power surged through her veins like electricity, and suddenly she could feel everything. She could feel Lucien's presence like a star burning bright beside her, could sense the vast well of his strength and the carefully contained hunger beneath his civilized exterior. She could feel his loneliness, sharp as broken glass, and his hope, fragile as spider silk. And beneath all of that, she could feel something else, something warm and protective and fierce that was directed entirely at her and Mira, and she could feel her daughter. Feel the sickness that had been slowly killing her being burned away by vampire magic. Feel Mira's tiny life force growing stronger with each passing second. Feel her daughter's joy and peace and the simple, perfect trust of a baby who knows she's loved. Thea gasped, tears streaming down her face. "It's working! Oh God, it's working!" Lucien caught her as her knees buckled, supporting her weight easily. "Easy," he murmured. "The bond is settling. You'll feel overwhelmed at first, but it will stabilize." "I can feel you," Thea whispered, staring up at him in wonder. "I can feel everything you're feeling, and I can feel you." His voice was rough. "Your love for her, your fear, your determination. It's—" He trailed off, seeming unable to find words. "Overwhelming?" Thea supplied. "Beautiful." The words seemed torn from him. "You're beautiful. Not just physically, though you are. But your soul, your essence, it's like sunlight. I'd forgotten what sunlight feels like." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, feeling the bond settle into place between them. On the bed, Mira stirred and let out a healthy cry, not the weak whimper of a sick baby, but a full, lunged demand for attention. Thea pulled away from Lucien and rushed to her daughter, lifting her into her arms. Mira's eyes were bright. Her skin had more color than it had in weeks, and when Thea touched her forehead, she felt warm and alive and strong. "She's okay," Thea breathed. "She's really okay." Lucien approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "The bond took. She's carrying my essence now. It will continue to heal her, strengthen her, protect her from illness and injury, far beyond what a normal human child could withstand. Thank you." Thea looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you so much. I don't have words for don't." He held up a hand. "Don't thank me yet. You don't know what kind of life you've just agreed to. What kind of complications this will bring. I don't care." Thea clutched Mira close. "My daughter is alive. Everything else is manageable." Lucien studied them both for a long moment, and something in his ancient eyes softened. "I hope you still feel that way in a month." The first week was an adjustment. Thea and Mira moved into the manor officially, taking rooms in the restored eastern wing. Lucien had servants vampires, Thea learned, though younger and less powerful than him, who had the place cleaned and furnished within a day. Suddenly the cold, empty manor became almost livable. Thea learned quickly that Lucien was a creature of careful routines. He rose at sunset, spent an hour in his study attending to what he called court business, then made the rounds of the manor, checking on security and maintaining the protective wards that kept the estate hidden from human and vampire eyes alike. He fed once a night blood from willing donors who visited the manor specifically for that purpose, transactions that were apparently common in the vampire world. He also spent time with Mira, which surprised Thea. The fearsome vampire king would sit in the nursery for hours, just watching the baby sleep or play. He didn't hold her at first, seeming afraid his supernatural strength might accidentally cause harm, but Thea could feel through their bond that he was fascinated by the child. "You can pick her up, you know," Thea said one evening, finding him standing over Mira's crib with an expression of profound longing. "She won't break. I haven't held a child in 300 years. Lucien's voice was quiet. "What if I hurt her?" "You won't. I can feel your control. It's absolute." Thea moved to stand beside him. "And she's already stronger thanks to your blood. Come on, she wants you to hold her. How do you know that?" "Mother's intuition," Thea smiled. "And also because she keeps reaching for you whenever you're near." It was true. Mira's tiny hands were stretching up toward Lucien, her eyes fixed on his pale face and white hair. She made an insistent sound, the kind that meant she wanted something and wanted it now. Slowly, carefully, Lucien reached down and lifted the baby from her crib. Mira settled into his arms like she belonged there, immediately grabbing a fistful of his white hair and tugging with surprising strength. Lucien froze, looking down at her with an expression of such raw wonder that Thea felt her heart crack open. "She's not afraid of me," he whispered. "Why would she be? You saved her life." Thea reached out and gently extracted Mira's fingers from Lucien's hair. "She knows you're safe. She can probably feel the bond too, in her own way." Lucien sat down slowly in the rocking chair, cradling Mira against his chest. The baby cooed happily, patting at his face with her tiny hands. "I never wanted this," he said quietly. "After Isabeau, I swore I would never care about anything mortal again. It hurt too much when they inevitably left. I know." Thea could feel the old pain through their bond, could sense how deeply he'd been hurt. But closing yourself off from pain means closing yourself off from joy too. And look at her, Lucien. Tell me this isn't worth the risk. Mira chose that moment to laugh, that same bright, pure sound that had first drawn Lucien to them, and something in his expression shifted. The careful walls he'd maintained began to crumble, and beneath them was something vulnerable and achingly human. "She's extraordinary," he breathed. "She is." Thea knelt beside the chair, watching them together. "And so are you, for giving her a chance at life." They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them bound together by blood and magic, and something that was starting to feel dangerously like family. As days turned into weeks, Thea and Lucien settled into a rhythm. Thea took care of Mira during the day while Lucien slept, and in the evenings they shared dinner human food for Thea, blood wine for Lucien, and talked about everything and nothing. Thea learned about his mortal life centuries ago in a world so different from this one that it might as well be fantasy. He'd been a lord, the youngest son of a powerful family, more interested in books and philosophy than politics or war. The transformation into a vampire had been violent and unwanted, a punishment for refusing to marry a rival family's daughter. "I fought it at first," Lucien told her one night as they sat by the fire. "Tried to hold on to my humanity, my morals, my old values. But time erodes everything, Thea. Decades became centuries, everyone I'd ever known turned to dust, and eventually I accepted what I was, a predator. A monster, a king of monsters. You're not a monster," Thea said firmly. "Monsters don't save babies. Monsters don't spend hours reading to a 6-month-old even though she doesn't understand the words. Monsters don't look at me the way you do. And how do I look at you? Like I'm something precious." Thea met his gaze. "Like I'm something worth protecting. Like maybe I'm someone you could care about." Lucien was quiet for a moment. "The bond makes it complicated. I can feel your emotions, your thoughts sometimes. It creates an intimacy that might not be real, might just be magic forcing us together. Or," Thea said softly, "the bond is just showing us what was already there. I liked you before the ritual, Lucien. I liked your honesty, your loneliness, your hidden kindness. The bond just lets me feel those things more clearly. You liked me when you thought I might kill you? I liked that you didn't." She smiled slightly. "And I liked that you listened, that you saw a desperate woman with a dying baby and chose compassion over cruelty. That says something about who you are, bond or not." Lucien reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his cold fingers lingering against her cheek. "You're dangerous, Thea Lawson, because I can hurt you?" "Because you make me want things I've denied myself for centuries." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Things like connection, trust. Maybe even he cut himself off, but Thea felt the word through their bond anyway. Love. Would that be so terrible?" she asked quietly. It would be terrifying. Good thing I'm brave enough for both of us then. Lucien's laugh was soft and surprised. Then he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But Thea leaned into it, her hand coming up to cup the back of his neck, and something shifted. The kiss deepened, became hungry, desperate, 300 years of loneliness pouring out of him and into her. Through their bond, Thea felt everything he felt, the desire, the need, the absolute terror of caring about someone again, and she met it all with her own emotions, her own growing love. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I haven't done this in a very long time, Lucien admitted, his forehead resting against hers. We'll figure it out together. Thea's fingers tangled in his white hair. We've got time. You have a mortal lifetime. I have eternity. Then we make the most of what we have. She kissed him again, softer this time. No regrets, no holding back. Just us for however long we get. Lucien pulled her into his lap, holding her close. You're going to ruin me, he murmured against her hair. Good. You deserve to be ruined. Thea settled against his chest, feeling the strange non-beat of his still heart. You deserve to feel everything, even the scary parts. They sat like that until dawn, tangled together, feeling the bond between them grow stronger with each passing moment. But peace never lasts forever in the vampire world. The trouble started 6 weeks after the bond was formed. Thea woke one evening to find Lucien standing at the window, his body tense, his expression dark. What's wrong? She could feel his anger through the bond, sharp and cold. The court has learned about you, Lucien said flatly. About what I did. They're sending an envoy to investigate. Is that bad? It's complicated. He turned to face her. Vampire law is ancient and specific. Bonds with humans are permitted, but they're supposed to be approved by the court first. I bypassed that requirement. Why? Because they would have said no. His jaw tightened. The court is controlled by old vampires who believe humans are food, not family. They would have seen Mira's illness as natural selection and forbidden me from interfering. So I didn't ask permission. Thea felt a chill run down her spine. What happens now? Now we deal with the consequences. Lucien moved to her side, taking her hands in his. Listen to me carefully, Thea. When the envoy arrives, you do not speak unless spoken to directly. You do not argue with them. You do not show fear. Vampires respect strength, and any weakness will be exploited. Do you understand? I understand. Thea squeezed his hands. Will they try to break the bond? They can't. It's too firmly established now, and breaking it would likely kill all 3 of us. But they can make our lives difficult in other ways. They can strip me of my title, my lands, my position in the court. They can declare you and Mira outcasts, which would make you targets for any vampire who wants to curry favor by enforcing court law. So we're in danger. You're in danger. I'm powerful enough that they won't risk attacking me directly. But you and Mira? He trailed off, his expression anguished. I've put you at risk by doing this. If the court decides to make an example, stop. Thea cupped his face in her hands. You saved my daughter's life. Whatever comes next, we face it together. That's what the bond means, right? We protect each other. You're mortal, Thea. There's a limit to what you can do against vampires. Then it's a good thing I'm bonded to the strongest vampire in the region. She smiled slightly. Use me, Lucien. Use the bond. If they try to hurt us, they hurt you too. And that has to count for something in their politics. Lucien stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into a fierce embrace. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. The envoy arrived 3 nights later. Thea was putting Mira to bed when she felt Lucien's warning through the bond, cold, sharp, urgent. She quickly finished tucking the baby in, activated the protection wards Lucien had taught her to use, and went downstairs to find the manor's great hall filled with vampires. There were 5 of them, all dressed in formal attire that looked like it belonged in a different century. They were pale and beautiful and terrifying, their eyes glowing softly in the candlelight, their presence radiating power. And at their center was a woman who made even Lucien's supernatural nature look subtle by comparison. She was tall and willowy, with white hair that fell to her waist and eyes like frozen silver. She wore a gown of deep crimson that matched her lips, and when she smiled at Thea, it was all sharp teeth and calculated malice. So this is the human, she said, her voice carrying easily across the hall. How ordinary, Lady Seraphine. Lucien stepped between Thea and the envoy, his body language protective. To what do I owe the honor of the court's attention? Don't play coy, Lucien. You know exactly why we're here. Seraphine moved closer, circling them like a predator. You created an unauthorized bond. You gave vampire essence to a dying human child without court approval. You've broken laws that have stood for millennia. I exercised my right as a king to use my own blood as I see fit, Lucien countered. The child was dying, and I chose to save her. There's no law against that. There's law against creating bonds that could expose our kind to discovery. Seraphine stopped directly in front of Thea, looking her up and down with obvious disdain. Desperate humans make mistakes. They talk. They seek help from the wrong people. This woman could bring hunters down on all of us. I won't, Thea said firmly, ignoring Lucien's warning squeeze of her hand. I have no interest in exposing vampires. I just wanted to save my daughter. How noble. Seraphine's tone was mocking. And what happens when your daughter grows up and asks questions? When she realizes she's stronger than other children, that she heals impossibly fast, that she's tied to a vampire king? Will you keep her ignorant? Let her suffer through an identity crisis? Or will you tell her the truth and risk her sharing that truth with the world? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Thea said. But I'll do whatever it takes to protect both my daughter and Lucien's secret. Will you? Seraphine moved impossibly fast, suddenly standing directly behind Thea with one sharp, nailed hand at her throat. Even if it means your own death? Because that's one solution the court is considering. Kill the mother, take the child, raise her in our world where she can be properly controlled. Lucien's roar shook the hall. Power exploded from him in a wave that sent several of the envoy vampires stumbling backward. His eyes blazed with fury, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Touch her, and I will destroy you and every member of the court who sent you. I am Lucien Zorath, king of the Northern Territories, and I do not make threats I cannot keep. Thea and her daughter are under my protection, bound to me by blood and magic. An attack on them is an attack on me, and I will respond accordingly. Seraphine removed her hand from Thea's throat but didn't back away. The court expected you would say that. They also expected you would be too blinded by your bond to see reason. Reason? Lucien's laugh was bitter. The court's idea of reason is controlling every aspect of vampire existence, crushing anything that resembles genuine emotion or connection. I've played their games for 3 centuries, Seraphine. I'm done. Then you're prepared to face the consequences of defiance? I'm prepared to fight for what's mine. A tense silence filled the hall. The other envoy vampires looked uncertain, clearly not expecting such direct confrontation. Seraphine, however, seemed almost pleased. Interesting, she said softly. The great Lucien Zorath, cold as winter for 300 years, suddenly willing to go to war over a human woman and her half-blood child. The court will want to study this phenomenon. The court can try, Lucien said flatly. They won't succeed. Seraphine smiled. We'll see. She turned to her companions. Let's return. The court will want a full report on this development. You're leaving? Thea asked, surprised. For now. Seraphine's silver eyes glinted. The court values strength, little human, and your vampire has just demonstrated that he's willing to burn the world for you. That buys you time, at least. But don't mistake a strategic retreat for surrender. The court will return, and when they do, they'll bring force you cannot imagine. Then we'll be ready, Thea said, stepping forward despite Lucien's hand on her arm. Because I'm not leaving him, and he's not giving us up. So if the court wants a war, they can have one. But they should know that we'll fight with everything we have, and we'll make it cost them more than they're willing to pay. Seraphine studied her for a long moment, then laughed a sound like breaking glass. Oh, Lucien, you've found yourself a mate with fangs of her own. How delicious! This will be entertaining to watch. With that, she swept from the hall, her companions following. The moment they were gone, Lucien pulled Thea into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again, he said roughly. Don't challenge ancient vampires who could kill you with a thought. I wasn't going to let her threaten us unchallenged. Thea pulled back enough to meet his eyes. We're in this together, remember? That means I fight too. You're going to give me a second heart attack just so I can die all over again. But there was pride in his voice, mixed with the fear. You were magnificent! I learned from the best. She kissed him softly. Now, what do we do about the court? We prepare. Lucien's expression turned calculating. Seraphine was right that they'll return with force. The court doesn't tolerate defiance, and I've just openly challenged their authority. They'll send warriors next time, not diplomats. Can we win against them? Alone? No, but I'm not without allies. He guided her to a chair and knelt beside her, taking her hands. There are other vampires who are tired of the court's stranglehold on our kind, younger vampires who want change, who believe the old ways are dying out. I've maintained neutral relationships with several factions who might be willing to support us if properly motivated. What kind of motivation? Proof that a bond like ours can work. That vampires and humans can coexist without disaster. that the court's fear-mongering about exposure is just a tool for control. Lucien's thumb traced circles on her palm. You and Mira, you're living proof that the old ways don't have to be the only ways. If I can rally enough support, the court might be forced to back down rather than risk a civil war. That's a lot of pressure to put on a 6-month-old baby, Thea said wryly. It's pressure I never wanted to put on either of you. Lucien's voice was heavy with guilt. I should have thought this through better. Should have anticipated the court's response. Now I've put you in danger. You saved my daughter's life, Thea said firmly. Everything else is just details we'll work through. Together. Over the following weeks, Lucien began reaching out to his contacts in the vampire world. Thea learned that vampire politics were incredibly complex, with dozens of competing factions, ancient grudges, and carefully maintained power balances. Lucien had spent centuries building a reputation as a neutral party powerful enough to be respected, but not interested enough in court politics to be a threat. Now he was calling in favors and making promises, building a coalition that could stand against the court if necessary. And slowly, vampires began arriving at the manor to meet with him. Some were genuinely curious about the bond, asking Thea dozens of questions about how it felt, whether she regretted it, whether Mira was truly thriving. Others were more interested in the political implications, seeing an opportunity to challenge the court's authority on a matter of principle. And a few came simply because they respected Lucien and were willing to support him regardless of the cause. Thea found herself in the strange position of being the face of human-vampire cooperation. She spoke at meetings, shared her story, and let vampires observe Mira to see for themselves that the child was healthy and happy and completely unbothered by her partial vampire nature. Your daughter is extraordinary, a vampire named Nikolai said one evening, watching Mira crawl across the floor at supernatural speed, giggling as she went. I've never seen a human child with such vitality. That's Lucien's blood at work, Thea said proudly. She's stronger, faster, healthier than any normal baby. And she's happy. That's what matters most. And you don't fear what she might become. Half-blood children are rare, but they often struggle with their dual nature. Then we'll help her through it. Thea scooped Mira up and settled her on her hip. Every parent faces challenges raising their children. Mine just happened to include explaining why she's faster than other kids and why she needs to visit a vampire king regularly to maintain her bond. We'll figure it out. Nikolai smiled slightly. You're either remarkably adaptable or in deep denial. Both, Thea admitted. But mostly I'm just grateful my daughter is alive to have these problems. As spring turned to summer, the coalition grew. More vampires arrived, some bringing news that the court was indeed preparing for confrontation. But they also brought support, pledging to stand with Lucien if it came to violence. Through it all, Thea and Lucien grew closer. The bond between them deepened, becoming something more than just magic. They spent their evenings together, talking and laughing and learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with supernatural connection and everything to do with genuine affection. Lucien taught Thea about vampire history, about the centuries of culture and tradition that shaped his world. Thea taught him about modern human life, about technology and social media, and all the ways the world had changed since he'd last paid attention. They read together, watched movies together, and took turns caring for Mira, who was growing stronger and more energetic every day, and they loved each other. Neither said the words yet, but both felt it through the bond a growing certainty that this was real, that they were meant to find each other, that the magic that had brought them together was just a catalyst for something that would have happened anyway. I never thought I could feel this way again. Lucien admitted one night as they lay together in his massive bed, Thea curled against his chest. After Isabeau, I was so certain I would spend eternity alone, and I was content with that, or I thought I was. But now, Thea prompted, now I can't imagine existing without you, without Mira, without these moments where I remember what it's like to care about something beyond simple survival. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. You've given me a reason to want tomorrow, Thea. That's more precious than you know. I know exactly how precious it is, she whispered, because you gave me the same thing. Before you, I was watching my daughter die slowly, day by day, knowing there was nothing I could do. I felt so helpless, so hopeless. But you changed everything. You gave Mira a future. You gave me a future, and you did it when you had every reason to turn us away. I couldn't turn you away. His arms tightened around her. From the moment I heard Mira laugh, something in me recognized you both, knew you were important, knew you were mine to protect. Yours to love, Thea corrected gently. Yes, the word was barely a whisper. Mine to love. They made love that night for the first time, and it was everything Thea had dreamed it could be. Lucien was careful with his supernatural strength, gentle and reverent, treating her like something precious. But there was passion too, centuries of denied emotion pouring out in kisses and touches and whispered words of devotion. And through it all, the bond sang between them, amplifying every sensation, every emotion, until Thea couldn't tell where she ended and Lucien began. They were one being, one heart, one love that transcended the boundaries of mortal and immortal. Afterward, lying tangled together in sweat-damp sheets, Lucien traced patterns on Thea's bare skin and said 3 words he hadn't spoken in 300 years. I love you. Thea's eyes filled with happy tears. I love you too. So much. I want forever with you, he said urgently. I know your life is limited, that you'll age and die while I remain unchanged. But I want every moment you'll give me. Every day, every year, every laugh and tear and ordinary moment. I want it all, Thea. You have it. She kissed him deeply. Every single moment is yours. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe when I'm older, when I've lived a full human life, we could talk about transformation, about making forever a reality instead of just a wish. Lucien's eyes widened. You would consider becoming a vampire? For you? For Mira? For this family we're building? Yes. Thea smiled. Not now. I want to experience being human, growing old naturally, all of that. But eventually, when the time is right, I'd want that. I'd want forever with you. Lucien kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of overwhelming love, and through their bond, Thea felt his joy, his relief, his utter devotion. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in centuries, Lucien's dreams were peaceful. The court's attack came in late August. Thea was in the garden with Mira, enjoying the last warm days of summer, when the wards shattered. Alarms screamed through the manor, and she felt Lucien's terror spike through the bond. Run! His voice echoed in her mind, carried by their connection. Take Mira and run to the safe room, now! Thea didn't hesitate. She grabbed Mira and ran, her daughter clutched to her chest, sprinting through the manor toward the reinforced chamber Lucien had prepared for exactly this scenario. Behind her, she heard crashes and screams, and the terrible sounds of violence. She made it to the safe room and slammed the door, activating every protection ward they had. Mira was crying, frightened by her mother's fear, and Thea held her close, whispering soothing nonsense, while her heart hammered in her chest. Through the bond, she felt Lucien fighting, felt his fury and his desperation and his absolute determination to protect them. She felt his pain when claws raked across his chest, felt his savage satisfaction when he tore an enemy vampire's throat out, felt his growing exhaustion as the battle dragged on. Please, Thea whispered to the empty air. Please let him be okay, please. The battle seemed to last forever. Thea huddled in the safe room, clutching Mira and feeling every blow Lucien took through their bond. She felt when Nikolai and the other allied vampires arrived to help, felt the tide of the battle shift, felt the court's warriors beginning to retreat. And then, finally, silence. Thea waited, heart in her throat, until she felt Lucien's presence outside the door. It's me, he said, his voice hoarse. You can open the door! She deactivated the wards with shaking hands and threw the door open. Lucien stood there covered in blood, most of it, not his own, his clothes torn, his white hair matted with gore. But he was alive, and when he saw Thea and Mira safe, his expression crumpled with relief. You're okay, he breathed. Thank every dark god, you're okay! Thea launched herself into his arms, not caring about the blood, just needing to feel him solid and real. I was so scared. I felt everything through the bond. I know. I'm sorry. I tried to shield you from the worst of it, but... He pulled back, checking her over frantically. You're not hurt? They didn't get to you? We're fine. Mira's fine. But you... She touched a deep gash on his shoulder that was already healing. You're injured. I'll live. I've survived worse. He took Mira from her arms, holding the baby close and pressing his face against her soft hair. They came with 20 warriors, Thea, 20 of the court's best fighters, if our allies hadn't arrived when they did. But they did arrive. We won. We survived, Lucien corrected. But this isn't over. The court has declared me a rogue king, and they've put a price on our heads. Any vampire who brings them proof of our deaths will be rewarded with land, titles, power. Thea felt cold dread settle in her stomach. So what do? We leave tonight. Lucien's expression was grim. I have a secondary stronghold hidden deep in the mountains. It's ancient, powerfully warded, and unknown to most of the vampire world. We'll be safe there while I figure out our next move. What about our allies? The vampires who helped us. They'll scatter, return to their territories. Some will continue to oppose the court. Others will go to ground until this blows over. But we can't rely on them for protection, not against the full force of the court. He met her eyes. I need you to trust me, Thea. Trust that I can keep you and Mira safe. I do trust you. She took his bloodied hand. Completely. So let's go. Let's disappear. and we'll figure out the rest when we're somewhere secure. They fled the manor within the hour, taking only what they could carry. Lucien had vehicles waiting, and he drove through the night, heading north into wilderness that grew increasingly remote. Thea dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, Mira asleep in her car seat in the back, while Lucien pushed the vehicle to its limits. Dawn was breaking when they finally arrived at a massive stone fortress built into the side of a mountain. It looked ancient and impregnable, with walls that had to be 20 feet thick and windows too narrow for anything larger than an arrow to pass through. "This is it," Lucien said, gathering their bags. "My first home from before I was turned. I've maintained it over the centuries, keeping it as a place to retreat when the modern world becomes too much." Inside, the fortress was surprisingly comfortable. Lucien had modernized the interior while maintaining the historical exterior, so there was electricity and plumbing and comfortable furniture mixed in with medieval architecture and ancient stonework. It felt safe, solid, like nothing could breach these walls. "We'll stay here while I reach out to my contacts," Lucien explained, getting Thea and Mira settled in a large suite of rooms. "There has to be a way to end this that doesn't involve running forever. Some leverage I can use against the court, some compromise they'll accept. And if there isn't," Thea asked quietly, "then we run forever." He cupped her face in his hands. "I will not let them have you, either of you. I don't care if I have to fight the entire vampire world, you're mine, and I protect what's mine." Days turned into weeks in the mountain fortress. Lucien worked tirelessly, using encrypted communications to contact allies and informants throughout the vampire world. Thea focused on keeping Mira happy and healthy, exploring the fortress, and trying not to think too hard about the fact that they were fugitives from an immortal court that wouldn't stop until they were dead. But despite the danger, there were moments of peace. Quiet evenings by the fire, the three of them curled together like a real family. Mira was thriving, growing rapidly, already starting to babble words and pull herself up to stand. She was fearless, this child who carried vampire blood in her veins, and she adored Lucien with the uncomplicated devotion only a baby could manage. "She called me Papa yesterday," Lucien confessed one night, his voice wondering. "I was playing with her, and she looked right at me and said, 'Papa.'" Thea's heart melted. "What did you say?" "Nothing. I couldn't speak. He shook his head. "I never thought I would be a father, never imagined I would have this kind of connection with anyone, let alone a human child. But she's mine, Thea. As surely as if I'd created her myself, she's my daughter." "She is," Thea agreed softly, "in every way that matters." They were still sitting there, wrapped in the warmth of that moment, when Lucien's phone rang. He answered it, his expression growing increasingly tense as he listened. "When?" he asked sharply. "How many?" A pause. "Understood. Thank you for the warning." He ended the call and looked at Thea with grim eyes. "The court is sending an army. Not 20 warriors, this time 200. They're done playing games." Thea's blood ran cold. "When will they get here?" 3 days, maybe 4. "My contact says they're moving slowly, gathering forces as they go, making sure we can't slip away again." Lucien stood, pacing like a caged animal. 200 vampires, Thea. Even with the fortress's defenses, even with our allies, we can't win that fight. Then what do we do? I don't know. For the first time since she'd met him, Lucien looked lost. "I don't know how to protect you from this." Thea watched him for a moment, feeling his desperation through their bond, his overwhelming fear of losing them, and suddenly she knew what they had to do. "We negotiate," she said firmly. "The court doesn't negotiate with rogues. They will if we give them something they want more than our deaths." Thea stood, moving to his side. "What does the court actually want, Lucien? Really want, beneath all the politics and power plays?" He frowned, thinking. "Control, stability, assurance that their secrets are safe. Exactly. They're not attacking us because they genuinely care about unauthorized bonds. They're attacking because they're afraid. Afraid we'll expose them. Afraid other vampires will follow our example. Afraid of losing their grip on power." Thea took his hands. "So we give them proof they have nothing to fear. We offer them something so valuable that killing us would be wasteful." "Like what?" "Like a treaty." Thea's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. "A formal agreement between humans and vampires, brokered by us. We have something unique, a proven bond, a half-blood child who's thriving, evidence that coexistence works. What if we offered to work with the court to establish guidelines for future bonds? To create a system where vampires can form connections with humans without risking exposure?" Lucien stared at her. "You want to legitimize what we did by making it official court policy? I want to make it so valuable to them that they'd rather use us than kill us." Thea's voice was steady. "You said yourself that younger vampires are tired of the old ways, that they want change. What if we become the mechanism for that change? The court keeps control, but they also get to evolve, to adapt to the modern world. And we get to live. It's brilliant, Lucien said slowly. It's also incredibly risky. If the court rejects the offer, then we're no worse off than we are now. Thea squeezed his hands. But if they accept, we get our lives back. Mira grows up safe. We get our forever. Lucien pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. When did you become such a strategic thinker? I learned from the best. She smiled against his chest. So what do you say? Want to gamble everything on one last negotiation? With you by my side? Always. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Lucien reached out to every contact he had, building support for the proposal. Several influential vampires, including Nikolai, agreed to act as mediators to present the treaty idea to the court before the army arrived. It was a desperate plan, full of variables they couldn't control, but it was better than simply waiting to be slaughtered. On the third day, Lady Seraphine arrived at the fortress gates alone, carrying a white flag. The court has agreed to hear your proposal, she announced, her silver eyes glinting with something that might have been respect. You have 1 hour to present your case. If they accept, you live. If they reject it, the army moves in at sunset. 1 hour to decide our fate, Lucien said quietly. No pressure. They prepared everything carefully documents, outlining the treaty terms, evidence of Mira's health and development, testimonials from allied vampires about the benefits of human-vampire cooperation. Thea dressed in her nicest clothes, trying to look professional and competent rather than like a terrified fugitive. Lucien looked every inch the king he was, regal and commanding in formal attire. And Mira, sensing the tension, was unusually calm. Watching everything with her 2 intelligent eyes, the court convened in the fortress's great hall, which Seraphine had transformed with magic into something resembling a formal vampire assembly. Dozens of ancient vampires filled the space, all pale and beautiful and terrifying. At their center sat 7 figures on ornate thrones, the court's ruling council. Lucien stepped forward, his hand in Thea's, and began to speak. He spoke about the bond, about how it had saved Mira's life and given him a reason to care about the world again. He spoke about the changing times, about how vampires needed to adapt or risk becoming extinct as the human world grew more interconnected and technology made secrets harder to keep. He spoke about controlled integration, about establishing systems where bonds could be formed safely, with court approval and oversight. Then Thea spoke, her voice steady despite her fear. She talked about the human perspective, about how most humans would never believe in vampires even if confronted with evidence. She talked about the potential for cooperation, for vampires to become protectors of humanity rather than just predators. She talked about Mira, about proof that the 2 species could coexist without disaster. And then Nikolai and several other respected vampires spoke, vouching for the plan, explaining how it would benefit the court by giving them more control rather than less, by making them arbiters of change rather than obstacles to it. When everyone had finished speaking, the council conferred in whispers too quiet even for vampire ears to catch. Finally, the central figure, an ancient vampire with white hair down to his knees and eyes like dying stars, spoke. Your proposal is acceptable, he said, his voice echoing strangely in the hall. The court agrees to establish a system of approved human-vampire bonds, with you, Lucien Zorath, and your human mate as the first official example. You will be responsible for evaluating future bond requests, for ensuring they are formed safely and with appropriate safeguards. You will report to the court regularly, and you will enforce our laws regarding secrecy and discretion. Thea felt relief so powerful she nearly collapsed. Lucien's hand tightened on hers, the only outward sign of his own emotions. In exchange, the ancient vampire continued, you will be restored to your position as king of the Northern Territories. Your bond with the human and her child will be recognized as legitimate, and any vampire who harms you or yours will answer to the full force of the court. We accept, Lucien said immediately. Then it is done. The ancient vampire stood, and the assembly rose with him. Let it be known that Lucien Zorath and Thea Lawson are under the court's protection. Their bond is sanctioned. Their child is recognized. Any who challenge this will face the court's wrath. Just like that, it was over. The army never arrived. The threat evaporated. They were safe. Seraphine approached them as the court dispersed, a slight smile on her lips. Congratulations, she said. You've accomplished something I would have thought impossible. You made the court evolve. That's no small feat. Will they actually honor this? Thea asked quietly. The court's word is absolute, Seraphine replied. They may not like what you forced them to accept, but they will honor it. You're safe now. Enjoy it. It's a rare gift in our world. She left them standing in the hall, clinging to each other, barely able to believe they'd survived. They returned to the manor a week later. The damage from the battle had been repaired, the wards had been strengthened, and it felt like coming home. Thea walked through the restored rooms with Mira on her hip, marveling at how much had changed since that desperate night when she'd first broken in looking for a miracle. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Lucien asked, finding her in the garden where she'd first played with Mira all those months ago. "Just remembering how terrified I was when I came here," Thea admitted. "How certain I was that you would kill us. How desperate I was to save Mira no matter the cost. And now I'm grateful." She turned to face him, her free hand finding his. "Grateful you listened. Grateful you took a chance on us. Grateful for every moment we've had and every moment we'll have in the future." Lucien pulled her close, wrapping them both in his embrace. "I'm the one who's grateful. You gave me a family, Thea. You gave me love. You gave me a reason to fight for something beyond simple survival. That's everything." Mira, squished between them, made a sound of protest and squirmed until Lucien adjusted his hold, lifting her up so she could see both their faces. She laughed that same bright, pure sound that had first broken through Lucien's walls and patted both their cheeks with her tiny hands. "Papa," she said clearly, then, looking at Thea, "Mama." Thea felt tears prick her eyes. "That's right, baby. We're your family, all of us." They stood there in the garden, the three of them wrapped in evening shadows, as the sun set and stars began to appear overhead. A vampire king, a human woman, and a half-blood child who represented something new in a world defined by ancient rules. Time passed. Seasons changed. Mira grew from a baby into a toddler, then a bright-eyed child who could run faster than human kids and heal from scrapes almost instantly. She grew up knowing both worlds, human and vampire, and navigated between them with the easy confidence of someone who'd never known anything different. Lucien and Thea's bond deepened until it was impossible to tell where magic ended and genuine love began. They were partners in every sense, raising Mira together, managing the new bond approval system for the court, building a life that honored both their worlds. Other vampires began forming bonds with humans, following the guidelines Lucien and Thea established. Slowly, carefully, the vampire world began to change, becoming less isolated, less rigid, less defined by fear and secrecy. And through it all, Lucien never stopped being amazed by the gift he'd been given. Every morning when he woke to find Thea sleeping beside him, every time he heard Mira call him Papa, every ordinary moment of their extraordinary life, he treasured it all. "Do you ever regret it?" Thea asked him one night, many years later. They were in their favorite spot by the fire, Mira now a teenager with her father's white hair and her mother's green eyes asleep upstairs. "Regret what?" Lucien asked, pulling her closer. "All of this. The bond, the trouble with the court, the responsibility of managing human-vampire relations. It's a lot to take on for one desperate woman and her dying baby." Lucien turned to look at her, his expression soft with love. "I regret nothing. You and Mira, you're the best thing that's happened to me in 3 centuries. You gave me back my humanity, Thea. You reminded me what it means to care, to love, to hope. I would go through everything again, face down 1,000 courts, fight 1,000,000 battles, if it meant I got to keep you." "That's good," Thea said, smiling, "because I'm not going anywhere. We made a deal, remember? Forever, forever." Lucien agreed, and kissed her as the fire crackled and snow began to fall outside. The years that followed were good ones. Mira grew into a remarkable young woman, bridging human and vampire worlds with grace and intelligence. She eventually chose to work alongside her parents, helping other half-blood children navigate their unique heritage. She brought home a nice boy human, to Lucien's relief and amusement, and spoke of wanting a family of her own someday. Thea aged slowly, the vampire blood in her system keeping her healthier and younger, looking than a normal human. When she reached 50, looking barely 40, she and Lucien had the conversation they'd been dancing around for years. "I'm ready," she said simply. "Ready to stop aging, ready for forever, ready to be yours in every sense." The transformation was gentle, guided by Lucien's ancient blood and their already established bond. Thea died as a human and woke as something new, not quite vampire, not quite human, but a perfect blend of both. She retained her humanity, her morals, her capacity for love and joy. But she gained immortality, strength, and the certainty that she would walk beside Lucien for eternity. "How do you feel?" he asked as she adjusted to her new existence. "Complete," Thea said, taking his hand. "Like I finally became who I was always meant to be." They renewed their vows under the stars, with Mira and their extended vampire family as witnesses. It was a celebration of survival, of love, of the family they'd built against all odds, and in the years and decades and centuries that followed, they never forgot the night that had started it all, the night a desperate mother had broken into a vampire's manor, gambling everything on a story and a hope. The night a baby's laugh had echoed through cold stone halls and broken through 300 years of loneliness. The night everything had changed. Lucien Zorath and Thea Lawson became legends in both the vampire and human worlds, proof that love could transcend species, that bonds could be stronger than fear, that even the most broken hearts could heal given the right reason. And at the heart of their story was always Mira, the child who should have died but lived, who grew up loved by two worlds, who represented the best of both human and vampire nature. She was their miracle, their reason, their joy, and she laughed often, filling whatever space she occupied with light and warmth and the reminder that even in darkness there is always hope. The manor on the hill never felt cold again. It was filled with love, with laughter, with the sounds of a family that had found each other against impossible odds and refused to let anything tear them apart. And sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, Lucien would stand in the doorway of whatever room Mira was in, even after she was grown, even after she had children of her own, and listen to the sound of breathing, of life, of love, and he would remember that moment when something in him had broken. When the cold, empty darkness he'd wrapped around himself had shattered at the sound of innocent laughter, that breaking had been the best thing that ever happened to him. It had let the light back in.